This is Tim Mason.
And I'm Mark Blood. And welcome to episode 9 of Blood, Sweat, and Tim.
Live from Crystal Pick Studios in Fairport, New York, it's another episode of Blood, Sweat, and Tim with your hosts, Mark Blood and Tim Mason.
You ever play that game, Mark, where a person gives you words and you try and figure out maybe what the topic is? I'm going to play that game with you right now.
I'm bad at games, Tim.
Okay, I know that, but I know you can figure this one out. Afraid to call or knock on someone's door. Entitled. Complainer versus an action taker. Me. Unsatisfied with their career. Unloyal to their employer. They can't handle the world's challenges and need a corporate parent. Cannot take criticism and are really sensitive.
Are you done?
No, I'm going on.
Oh,
are
okay.
really sensitive and narcissistic. Come on, Mark. What is our topic?
We're outnumbered in the room right now. We're talking about millennials, and we're trying today to make millennials not a four-letter word, and really open people's eyes to the opportunities of the generation. And we are outnumbered in the room today. We're the old guys, and everybody else sitting in here today is the millennial, and they're the next generation, and they're what's next. We're not what's next. So I'll let these guys introduce themselves and give a little context of where they're from, and we're going to have a spirited conversation today.
I'm Katie Guyton. I'm an architectural designer at Bergman Associates Architecture and Engineering downtown.
And Katie, how do you spell your name?
I spell it C-A-D-Y, just
Definitely
for fun.
a millennial.
I'm Mike Toda. I work for Mark at DeJoy, Knopf and Blood in the tax practice.
He's a supervisor. That means he takes care of a lot of people, does a great job at it, and tells a lot of other people what to do, including me at times.
Try to make Mark look good.
Every day.
And my name is Michael Blood. I work at Genesee Regional Bank as a relationship manager.
I recognize that last name, Blood.
Yeah, I might be related to the big guy over across the room there.
We're still outnumbered, Tim.
So basically, you get millennial 24/7, 365. I mean, I know Mike's not at home, but boy.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I have two of those, too.
Right. So today's our opportunity to take a little of the mystery out of millennials and help to maybe connect the millennial generation to many people who have small and closely held businesses. One of the lines I've overused, and I'm sure Tim's eyes are rolling back in his head. Tim and I grew up in the MacGyver generation, where you had this guy who could figure out any problem, could figure out any piece of equipment with a little bit of duct tape and a couple paper clips, could get the machinery to work and could figure out how to make things work. And I think there's a little bit of an analogy for business people in the MacGyver generation, where we as business people in Tim's and my generation, we have opportunities, and those present challenges of how we take a generation that's very different from us in a lot of ways, and how we figure out how to be inclusive of them in our businesses, be responsive to them in our businesses, learn from them in our businesses, and find opportunities for them to be the next generation.
And I think that this is going to be a great conversation, because I think there are a lot of stereotypes that these folks in the room can help overcome, because they're all very successful young people within their companies, and they represent, a group of people who are our next generation of business leaders. And we want people like them and others in our organizations today. So I'm going to start this off, because when Katie came in, she mentioned something that one of her leaders over at Bergman might have mentioned. She said, "I'm going to do this millennial podcast." And he said, "You're not a millennial, you work hard." And Katie, I'm wondering, how did that make you feel? And, that's kind of stereotypical, right? I mean, how can you overcome that?
Absolutely. And so I clarified for him the two stereotypes, right? One, I do feel I fit. The other one, the laziness, I don't think of myself as lazy. I do work hard, but I am pretty outspoken. And so, I like to think I'm worth it. He agreed that we did, I put in the time. So I fit the other millennial stereotype, the sort of cranky, outspoken, let's make what we do matter kind of stereotype.
Does
there.
it matter, Mike Toda, that people kind of give you guys a bad rap?
I mean, it does bother me sometimes, the overgeneralization. I think that happens a lot of times with millennials because, there are a lot of us, specifically the three of us in this room, who do work hard, who are kind of against the grain as far as the typical millennial. So it does bother me a little bit when people kind of make those overgeneralizations.
I love to prove them wrong.
Well, so let me tag on to something that you said. I like to think I'm worth it. So if you take the extension of that and you say, I like to think I'm worth it, what are you looking for out of your employer for them to be able to show you that you're worth it?
I think Bergman has gone a long way to sort of fulfill that for this newer generation. They appreciate the praise. I think there's a lot of us that tend to go above and beyond, and so we like to work hard and play hard. We have a young professionals group at the company. We have some fun in-house events as well, so it helps us to make the workplace not just somewhere we come in, punch the time clock, and leave, but somewhere we enjoy being, and so it makes it easier to go above and beyond when the job requires it.
How important is culture in a company to be accepting to the millennial generation today? And do you find maybe in a couple of the companies you've been with it's kind of counter to that, or are they becoming more accepting?
Absolutely, Tim. I mean, I think culture is very important. I think when you come in to a company, that's one of the first things that you're looking at. Are you going to fit in? Are you going to be able to relate? And, that's what's going to be important. I think looking on it, we want to know, what our strengths and weaknesses are and how can we provide it to our employer. We want recognition for what we do best. I think we're looking for frequent and informal check-ins versus maybe, a yearly review or something along that nature.
So kind of management by observation, not necessarily some strict performance review process?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think the culture is incredibly important. Obviously, given that the growth in the millennial in the workplace, if you're not, kind of at least taking that into consideration in your culture, you're going to miss out on a lot of talent in the future. Maybe a little more bleak if you're not kind of conscious of this millennial factor when, in your everyday company culture.
So define culture, though. For you guys, what is the culture? What's the ideal culture for a millennial in the workplace today, in your opinion?
In my opinion, it definitely looks a little different than what it has been in the past as far as flexibility. So that's flexibility in time and location of work, modes of communication. We want to be able to kind of communicate more informally and through a bunch of different mediums, from texting to emails and all that. So flexibility is a huge key. And to piggyback on what Mike said, the feedback is kind of also plays into it. I think millennials are very conscious of how they want to be conscious of how they're performing to kind of accelerate their career and really grow their career. So having those, maybe they're more informal check-ins or more consistent feedback from their superiors is going to be incredibly important. For a millennial workplace.
One of the interesting things I always think about feedback, because we've talked, a couple of people have brought up the feedback thing. Whose responsibility is that?
I mean, ultimately, I think it's our responsibility,
So if it's your responsibility, how do you go about getting it? How do you go about putting yourself into a position where you can get the feedback, you can kind of set yourself up a relationship or a network where you're going to get feedback, as opposed to sitting at your desk and waiting for somebody to stop by and say, "Oh, you did great today." Is it really a two-way street? What is it? What is it that is your responsibility, and what is the business's responsibility or the organization's responsibility?
I think it's really important for it to have a dialogue between that leadership and some of us more on the lower side, to transparent communication between the two of us. Whether it's, I think commitment is very important. We need that mutual commitment. So and if we're on the same path, I'm not afraid to go into your office and ask for that feedback or let you know what I've been doing, and I respect an honest opinion given back to me. So it's that sort of.
So what sets the stage for that for you? I mean, if you had examples in your daily life of that, you obviously identified somebody that said, I feel comfortable going to them, looking for feedback and getting it from them. And there's other people that you may have identified that you don't have that relationship with. What's the differentiator?
I think we do have leadership that have gone above and beyond to make it a point that my door is always open. And hearing that sets a stage for a level of comfort to have that conversation.
So Mike, you work in one of the oldest businesses on the face of the earth in terms of, banking's been around for forever. How have you seen bankers assimilate to that, or banking organizations assimilate to what may have been viewed as being a stodgy organization where you go to your desk and you do your work, and now you're looking for a collaborative environment where you're getting feedback on a regular basis? How do you see that changing?
Well, I mean, I think it's a two-way street, like you said. I mean, I think it comes down to me as a worker and my manager or boss, et cetera. I mean, you have to build a relationship with them from the start. That's going to allow you to go in and ask the questions that are necessary to be able to do a good job at the work that's assigned to you.
So I can now open myself up to some criticism, since I have Mike Toda sitting over here who works for me, and ask him kind of the same question. I mean, you would have that same question inside of our organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of trust factor is huge for the manager and the staff person to kind of start. One of the things I always think about is, as the millennial, you need to be receptive to the feedback. And once that kind of happens, so there's that stereotype that millennials are entitled and maybe they don't want to hear, I guess, honest or brash feedback, maybe something that they could work on. So I think the kind of mindset that millennials need to take is that if I'm going to ask for the honest feedback, I need to be ready to take it. And if there's things I need to work on, I need to actually, create a plan of how to work on that stuff. And I think once that kind of happens, there's respect from the manager down to the staff person that says, all right, we're meeting and I'm giving them feedback, and they're taking that feedback and improving themselves. And that kind of establishes a trust of that, the manager doesn't feel like they're wasting their time with the staff person who's constantly asking for feedback and wants to always know how they're doing. So I think that's a huge piece.
So you use the magic word. The magic word is stereotype. And if you look at the millennial generation, or whatever you want to call it, it is characterized by a bunch of stereotypes. And Tim led off with some of them that were, his little snippets of what those stereotypes are. What do you think some of those other stereotypes are that are worthy of being broken? Well, I stumped him.
I can touch on one. So, I mean, going back to what Tim started with, he mentioned being unloyal to your employer. So I don't necessarily think us millennials are unloyal to our employer. I think we're looking for that perk or looking for that job that's going to allow us to exploit our strengths and weaknesses. That's what we're looking for.
And so you're equating it to the stereotype is we're willing to make quicker decisions to try to find that connection, to try to find that relationship, to try to find that opportunity to be in that position where I think our friend Ray Isaac used the term to find their why. Why am I doing it?
Absolutely. So what is the thing that you, over a short period of time, start to want to get a hold of to know that you're in the place that's going to be a future for you?
I feel, we want to be engaged. We want to, be confident in our work, and we want the feedback in our.
But what I love these words. What does engaged mean to you?
I want the opportunity. I want to continually be challenged and given new opportunities and given the chance to either fail or succeed. And I appreciate the safety net there of leadership, the trusting me to try.
There's one thing I can't remember if I read it in an article, I heard about it in another podcast, but there's kind of three main things that millennials really want in a workplace, or this is kind of a stereotype of things that they want that I really identified with. The first being autonomy. They want to be able to kind of choose their own destiny, I guess, choose their own path in the workplace. They don't have somebody breathing down their neck all the time. That's really important in a culture. They want mastery. They want to be able to learn. They want to be able to master a skill and kind of reach a level of achievement in their work. And they also want purpose. So purpose being they're making a difference in the world. They're making a difference in the lives of other people. So those three things kind of really resonated with me as making a ton of sense for things that we're going to look for in a workplace. And, if we get those three things, maybe there's other things as well that would be considered. But
So I didn't hear compensation part of that. Does that matter, or are you guys willing to work for free?
I mean, I'm not willing to work for free.
I do have loans to pay.
Yeah, I got bills.
I totally appreciate that. I was just kidding. But.
The compensation is definitely a piece. I don't think it's as big of a piece as it has been historically for maybe people in different generations. I think a lot of my contemporaries would be more willing to work for a lower salary if they thought their work had legitimate meaning, or they were really making a difference. Whether it be in the world, in their industry, in their company. So, they actually have a purpose to wake up in the morning.
So happiness comes before, the bank account.
Money can't buy happiness.
Yeah. And I think that kind of even feeds into the flexibility a little bit. Like, millennials are kind of with the mindset that they don't want work to really get in the way of life. That, which may or may not be.
Do they now call work vacation?
I don't think it's gone that far. But it's just
I'm baiting you guys.
That's kind of their
come on, we got to heat this up, right?
You want me to come across the
come right across the table. That would be
I think one of the interesting stereotypes is millennials talk and talk and talk about work-life balance, right? I'll be the first to say I don't really have a work-life balance. Work kind of is my life, but it's because I have the opportunity to do something I'm very passionate about if it aligns with what we happen to be doing at work. And so that's a struggle for, I think, both me and some of my bosses to sort of keep me satisfied in that way, because, I'll bend over backwards and work like crazy, but it's got to be worth it. It's got to matter in the larger concept of outside of the dollars the companies are making.
And to Mike's point earlier about autonomy, right? I mean, it's autonomy. I equate to trust too, right? They got to trust that you've got a job to do. You're going to do that, whether you're working 32 hours because you want to be home with a child, or you're working from home because there's an arrangement that you've made with your employer. I see that stuff coming in, to be honest with you, okay? As a late 50s person who manages, 35 plus people, it's an old guard's, mentality that, if they're not here, they're not working, okay? And so it's been tough to overcome. And so you guys are here to say that you got to trust, autonomy, all those things are key to, what you are looking for and seeking from an employer.
So Tim, you're a guy who's in a position that you've had some of your behavior has had to morph over time.
Totally.
So you're looking for the opportunity to trust in the millennial generation. You're looking for the opportunity to be open to this. You're a sales and marketing guy. How would you want these guys to sell to you? Don't worry about it, Tim. Don't worry about it. We're on it.
I think it comes down to being accountable. I think that's a huge word. And I think if you guys understand what the expectations of your employer are and the jobs you have to do and the deadlines that are there, all you got to do is screw up once if you're working from home or there's some other arrangement, or hey, I'm going to come in at 10 and work till 7, that type of thing. And I've had to make sure what I bring to the party with my people is these are my expectations. These are the things that you need to be accountable for. And as long as you're making that, it goes to autonomy and trust, then we're going to get there. But it did take, how can they possibly do that from home? They're going to be watching television, or they're going to be doing something different. How could they possibly stay home with a child because the child's going to distract them from their work? It's a mentality that many of us as managers have had to overcome.
But
and
let me
it's
go
a
back
tough one.
but let me go back to that for a second. Like I said, you're a sales and marketing guy. These guys are guys that are working for you. They're producing. How do you need to be sold as the employer that, trust me, give me the autonomy, give me the opportunity, give me the openness to be able to do it on some of my own terms, and at the same point in time, put you as a business owner in a position that you can extend out that trust. So I guess I would ask you guys the question: if you're looking at a guy who's in Tim's position, how do you sell that to him? How do you sell to him that you can be the
Trust me.
You can be the player in his business?
I think I'm in a little bit of a different role than they are. I'm in a sales role, so accountability is huge. Every day, my chief lending officer is saying, if you're here in the branch, you're doing something wrong because you're not out talking to your clients. So if he
got numbers
sees
to
you, we have to hit numbers, and those numbers are essentially your accountability. So when those comes through, then, Tim or whoever it is, maybe that's how they build their trust.
So your outcomes are measured differently. Your outcomes can oftentimes be measured in true numbers. But you have a guy like Mike here who's in a position that he has to produce X amount of work. And it's not really necessarily measured by, you had X amount of new sales right now. So how do you hand off that trust? How do you sell a guy like Tim or a guy like me and say, listen, don't you worry, I'm going to get it done?
Right. I think the expectation, the communication of expectations is so important. And I don't want my managers to trust me blindly. I want to prove myself that I can do the work. I can meet deadlines. Obviously, we're in a very intense deadline intensive business. So as long as expectations are clearly communicated to me, and I show you that I'm meeting deadlines regardless of when I'm working, where I'm working, all those factors, if I can prove to you that I can meet these deadlines or I can get this work done when it's supposed to be done, then that's kind of where it goes, right? I can't really prove it to you other than doing it, I
don't even think that's much different than a sales approach. He has goals to meet, their deadlines, and we're doing the same thing.
Right. It's about producing outcomes.
Right.
It's about producing what is valuable to the business, what's valuable to the customer. But you're asking for something a little more. You're asking for the connectedness to it. You're asking for, what's my purpose in this?
Mark, you talked before about the why. I want to change this a little bit because you guys are talking about, somebody said they want to hear, feedback more often and how are we doing and things, right? And I think one of the issues that I've faced is in this Y generation, and I don't know if you guys would agree, there's some questioning that comes in, right? You want to make things better. I get that, okay? But I've been running a business for 27 years, and the hardest thing in the world for me is somebody to come in and go, I don't know why the hell you're doing that, okay? And then a lot of times they're not willing to accept the answer to that, yet they're willing to critique the situation. And I think that starts to give millennials a bad name. They don't necessarily come with solutions. One of the things I think you build autonomy and trust and all those things is by also bringing solutions to the party. I think you guys have been stereotypically defined as complainers. And, I've interviewed people, I think I mentioned this to Mark, I've interviewed people who, bottom line, want my job, 1 year into this. And you got to earn that, right? And there's some things that I know with the gray hair and 25 years and a reputation that I think need to be imparted on that. So I think it's a combination of things where your why, I have to be open to your why, but frankly, you have to be open to my answer to that why. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. It goes both ways. For sure. We, millennials can question and question you on what you do and why you do it. And I think it brings about a good dialogue, really, even for the business owner who may have been, run this business for 25 years, millennial mindset may make you think about things a little differently. So I think the dialogue's good. And maybe there is a good reason for why you're doing certain things. And, us as millennials need to be okay with that being the answer. And if it makes sense to us, then that's good. But I like the dialogue that it brings. And I think that's going to encourage us as millennials to be kind of future business leaders of us, in this mindset of asking why and how we're doing things. Can we do things differently? I think that mindset could bode well into the future.
And Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but in your experience, you've like you've said, you've been doing this for a while, and so you've got the how down pretty well, right? But maybe it may be
At least
somehow
we think
don't care about it.
But at least we think we do.
Right.
But
Well, you've got
we
the
may have
how
had
down.
the how down 10
how
years
it's worked
ago.
up till now.
Right.
So so if me or some other millennial is going to come in and ask you why, just sort of force you to rethink it. And I don't know if that's appreciated or because there may not be a good answer there.
I think a good manager or a good leader of a company will appreciate that. I've had to learn to appreciate it. Again, you're talking about a whole cultural change, right? So our company in advertising and especially on the digital marketing side, I don't have any non-millennials on the business. So I've had to accommodate that. I've had to switch that, my mentality. I bring some discipline, some accountability, some financial accountability, making sure people know what the expectations are. One of the things I think is missing a little bit, and I'd love for you to hear you guys' opinion, is connections with your clients, okay? I'm about personal relationship. More in the banking side, you're going out meeting with people. Can I have lunch? Can I have a cup of coffee? Can I have breakfast? It's a little bit different there. But if you guys are communicating with a client, it's like, I sent them an email. I don't know what happened. They didn't get back to me. Okay, I left them a voicemail. I mean, who checks voicemail anymore? Are you guys really afraid to talk to people? Come on.
I think as a
Wow, that's like a throwdown.
I've got 20 unread voicemails sitting on my cell phone.
Drop the glove.
Drop the gloves, hit them.
No, I think that can be an issue for some younger people in that their method of communication is different than what it has been in the past. And I think that's definitely a barrier for us as millennials. But the one thing I always think about is that millennial business owners are kind of going to be growing as we're growing in our companies. So as I'm communicating with clients and we get new clients, their owners are going to be millennials. They're going to be communicating the same way that I do. And I don't think emails are that impersonal. I feel like I know my clients just from emails back and forth, and that's obviously different than what the mindset
But Mike, the
your
worst
generation.
excuse for anybody in my company is telling me I sent them an email.
Right, yeah.
Honestly,
yeah,
right?
and
I mean, you can appreciate because
that-
it is
but
a
that's-
relationship
But
business.
the email's not
Right.
a result. The result you want is a happy customer. And whoever that person is that's saying that to you is saying, I was successful in my job because I sent them an email.
But that's not being successful in their
Right.
job with an
And
expectation.
What your definition of success is the outcome of I took great care of a client and I
Right.
have a very happy client.
Right. So voicemails, emails, texts, all that stuff. I get it. I love that communication. It's so important. Important with my kids, important with my wife. But there's a happy medium with doing that with clients and customers because at the end of the day, you still want a relationship. I actually think the world will evolve from this kind of faceless communication to having to bring that in. I think millennials will learn that they're going to have a face-to-face relationship. At the end of the day, looking somebody in the eye goes a lot further than sending them, a 90-character text.
From Mark Blood and Tim Mason, thanks for listening to this edition of Blood, Sweat, and Tim. Stay tuned for part 2 of this BST Millennials podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. Please subscribe to Blood, Sweat, and Tim on your favorite podcast app.